I'm Erin Walsh, 31, and last December, my parents mailed me a bill for caregiving. $12,300, itemized. Room, board, utilities. They never counted the 1,372 hours I spent changing bandages, tracking chemo side effects, or waking up at 3 a.m. to stop a fever before it landed Mom in the ER. They counted the water I boiled for her tea, the Wi-Fi I used to schedule her appointments, the electricity it took to keep her medication fridge cold. I didn't yell when I opened that envelope. I didn't call. I didn't cry. I just opened my laptop, pulled up the care diary I'd been keeping for 11 months, and started typing my own invoice. Because when you're the good daughter, they never expect you to keep receipts. But I did. If you've ever been the one who stayed, the one who folded towels and swallowed pride, the one who gave up your life so someone else could keep theirs, hit like, subscribe, and tell me in the comments. What's the one thing you wish they'd thanked you for? I had just stepped off the tee, coat still damp from the March drizzle, when my phone buzzed. I almost didn't pick up. It was 9:42 p.m., and all I could think about was microwaving leftover pad thai and sinking into David's hoodie-covered shoulder on the couch. But I saw Dad on the screen, and the rare, terrifying possibility that something might be truly wrong jolted me. Erin. His voice cracked through the static. It's your mom. They think it's cancer. It felt like someone pulled the concrete of the city out from under me. I barely registered my own questions. What kind? Where? How bad? The answers came in fragments. Stage 3. Breast. Started chemo next week. I stood still on the sidewalk outside the Charles M.G.H. station, letting the crowd move around me like a current. When he said stage 3, I didn't even feel the rain anymore. I just heard my own heartbeat, counting beats like a metronome of dread. David was waiting for me with herbal tea and open arms when I walked in, drenched and silent. I didn't cry. I just stood there in my scrubs, bag still slung over one shoulder, letting the silence hold us together. Later that night, after I'd thrown clothes into the laundry and set my alarm for another 6:30 a.m. shift, the real conversation began. A family Zoom meeting. My mother, pale but composed. My father, hiding panic behind his usual stoic expression. Melissa, calling in from Seattle with her toddler babbling in the background. I can't just up and leave, you know, Melissa said, half apologetic. Jason's work is crazy, and Riley's preschool won't accommodate. I knew where this was heading before anyone even looked at me. You're already in the field, my mom offered gently. And Boston's only a few hours from Allentown. Bruce added, We don't want to push, honey, but your mom needs help. And then there was that silence. The kind families have trained into themselves. The kind where one person is expected to nod, to be the strong one, the one who says, okay, even when their chest feels like it's caving in. I said yes. Not because I was forced. Not because they demanded it. But because the room went still, and I didn't know how to be the person who says no. Janelle, my coworker at the hospital, looked stunned the next morning when I told her I'd be taking leave. You're seriously walking away? We just got that grant. You were next in line for lead nurse on the trial. I nodded, avoiding her eyes. Just 6 months. David tried to keep his expression neutral when I broke the news over homemade pancakes. So, you're leaving Boston? I'll still be close, I said. It's temporary. He hesitated. Do you think we'll make it through this? I couldn't answer. My hands were busy folding a shirt that smelled like home, like lavender and laundry and the life I had just begun to build. A life that now felt like it belonged to someone else. By the end of the week, the apartment was mostly packed. David said he'd keep my plants alive. My lease would be sublet to a grad student from Tufts. The door creaked as I locked it from the outside one last time. 6 months, I told myself as I turned the key for the last time. Just 6 months. By week 3, I could recite Mom's medication list in my sleep, and often did. Leuprolide every 21 days, letrozole daily, Zofran on nausea days, Docusate when the chemo constipated her, Tylenol for the fevers, every label, every dosage, every food interaction, engraved like scripture in my head. I even remembered which drawer the peppermint candies were in for the metallic taste she hated after each infusion. The days had become indistinguishable, blurred together by the whir of the washing machine, the beeping of the pill reminder app, the soft coughing echoing through the narrow hallway at 3 a.m. Allentown in June was sticky and relentless, the old air conditioner in the living room wheezing like it too needed a caregiver. Every morning I woke up with a start, not from an alarm, but from the way the sun roasted the room by 6:30. "Did you boil the water for her tea?" Dad would call out from the couch, one eye on the Weather Channel. "She can't have cold water after chemo. You know that?" "I know, Dad." He had his own brand of presence, watchful from a distance, remote in all the ways that made me feel like the only adult in the room. He made toast sometimes. He drove her to appointments. But mostly he gave instructions like I was the intern and he was the attending. Mom was too tired to notice. And Melissa? Well, Melissa made her regular Zoom calls on Sundays. Camera angled just right so Riley could pop in with a glitter drawing and Jason could wave vaguely from the background. "I don't know how you do it," she said one evening while Riley sang something off-key nearby. "I mean, even with help, I'm drowning over here." I smiled. "You've got a toddler. That's real too." But I never mentioned how I hadn't sat down to eat a full meal in 2 weeks, how my hands were starting to crack from constant sanitizing, how I sometimes forgot what my voice sounded like when it wasn't clipped and instructional. Then, one afternoon, Janelle called. "Just for 2 weeks," she said. "You don't even need to take a full load. We're swamped. You'd be a godsend." Hearing her voice felt like stepping into sunlight after months underground. I could picture the hospital, the buzz of controlled chaos, the whiteboards, the scrubs, the lives being pieced back together. My life. I almost said yes. "I can't," I said instead. "My mom..." She didn't push. She just exhaled, long and slow. "You've always been the reliable one, Erin. Just make sure you don't disappear in the process." That night, after everyone had gone to bed, I started writing a care diary. Not because I needed it. I already knew Mom's med schedule like my own name. But because I needed something that was mine. A place to unload without apology. A ledger of duties disguised as a whisper for help. 8 a.m. Antiemetic, crushed into oatmeal. 10:30 a.m. Cleaned vomit again. 2:15 p.m. Dad reminded me I didn't fold towels the way Mom likes. Sometime past midnight, Mom called for water. I sat by her bedside watching her drift back to sleep, the soft rise and fall of her chest syncing with the ticking of the clock. "You're just naturally good at this," she murmured, half asleep. "Melissa would be lost." She meant it as gratitude. I heard it as a chain tightening. When I finally made it to the bathroom around dawn, I caught my reflection. The woman in the mirror had shadows under her eyes that no concealer could fix, hair tied in a hasty knot, fingers raw and red from antiseptic wipes. I couldn't remember the last time someone asked how I was. Melissa arrived with matching sweaters for the kids, and suddenly I was the ghost of Christmas fatigue. They came tumbling in, Riley, Owen, and little Ellie, all wearing identical red sweaters with glitter reindeer and wide grins that reeked of Pinterest parenting. Bruce greeted them at the door like royalty returning from exile, and Diane's face lit up in a way I hadn't seen in weeks. Not for me. Within 15 minutes, the house felt warmer. Bruce was whistling as he basted the ham. Diane sat upright on the couch, mascara on and her scarf tied in a careful loop. I stood near the kitchen window, towel in hand, drying the dishes no one had thanked me for washing. Melissa swept through the room like a holiday ad, offering up stories from Seattle, the school fundraiser she ran, Jason's new gym obsession, how Ellie had learned to sing the alphabet backward. Every nod from Bruce was eager, every laugh from Diane full-bodied and effortless. They called it a vacation. For me, it was just another shift. one where I had to smile while my workload doubled and my presence disappeared. Dr. Patel's call came while I was refilling the ice tray. "Diane's latest scans are good," he said. "The tumors regressed significantly. Not out of the woods, but the trend is positive." I blinked at the freezer light. That's great." He must have heard something in my voice. "Your consistency made a difference, Erin. I hope someone's telling you that." They weren't. After I hung up, I found a quiet corner and checked my email. One unread message from David. I hadn't seen him in 6 months. His last visit ended with a long hug and a shorter goodbye. Subject: "For what it's worth." I kept thinking you'd come back to Boston once things settled, but I'm starting to see maybe you didn't just leave us. Maybe you left yourself too. Take care of you, Erin. You're more than what they need. David. I stared at it until the screen blurred. That night, over ham and mashed potatoes, Diane laughed so hard at one of Riley's jokes that she had to dab her eyes. Melissa took photos. Bruce poured wine. And when dinner ended, Bruce raised his glass. "To Melissa," he said, "for all the emotional strength she's given us from afar. Her calls, her words, they kept us sane." Diane nodded, adding gently, "Melissa just gets me." She really understands what I feel. Erin's been amazing with the logistics, of course. The charts, the meds. "Just doing the tasks," Bruce finished. "But they've both supported in their ways." I didn't say anything, not even when Diane turned to me with an attempt at a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. The lights on the tree blinked behind them, casting shadows that seemed to mock the bright veneer of togetherness. Melissa's phone buzzed with another notification. I could hear Ellie singing softly in the hallway. I stood, went upstairs, and opened my laptop. I pulled out my diary. Every line, every tracked symptom, every side effect logged, every emotional note I'd written down in the dark while they slept and I didn't, was right there. Page after page of unpaid labor, of invisible presence. I copied it line by line into a new spreadsheet. Dates, dosages, duties. I didn't add commentary. I didn't attach emotion. If they wanted numbers, I had numbers. When the envelope arrived, I thought it was a Christmas card. What I got was a bill. It was pale green with a gold embossed border, the kind that screams, "Happy Holidays" from someone who still sends physical mail. I opened it at the kitchen table, still wearing yesterday's sweatshirt and sipping lukewarm tea. Diane was upstairs resting after her morning meds. Bruce had gone out for groceries. The paper inside was stiff and cold. Room and board, $9,000. Utilities, electric, water, internet, $2,400. Household consumables, $900. Total due, $12,300? I blinked. Then again. The line at the bottom. Payable within 30 days. Checks preferred. I didn't cry. Not then. I waited until Bruce returned, set the paper down in front of him like a bomb I refused to defuse. "You sent this?" My voice was steady. He didn't look surprised. "Well," he started, setting down his keys. "We're all doing our part here, Erin. You've been living here rent-free for almost a year. It's only fair." I couldn't tell if it was rehearsed or just convenient. I gave up my job. "We didn't ask you to quit. That was your decision. You handed me Mom's medication plan the same night I arrived." He shrugged, walking to the fridge. "Still doesn't change the fact that we've covered your food, shelter, electricity." I turned away before he could finish. My stomach curdled. Not from what he said, but from the tone. Mild, justified, corporate. Melissa's call came later. I didn't pick up, but she left a voice message. "Hey, Erin, just talked to Dad. Listen, it's just money, okay? Don't make it dramatic. We're all stretched. You're acting like they're villains." I stared at the screen. I didn't respond. Instead, I opened my laptop and brought up the diary I'd been keeping since the first week. I wasn't even sure why I started it back then. Maybe to make sense of the mess. Maybe because some part of me knew no one else would remember. March 27th, 2024, 2:34 a.m. Monitored blood pressure drop after nausea episode. May 14th, 2024, 7:10 p.m. Administered second dose of Neulasta injection. July 2nd, 2024, 9:50 a.m. Redress surgical site. Logged signs of infection. I went through page after page. I created a spreadsheet. 1,372 logged hours of direct medical care. At $34 an hour, the going rate for registered home nurses in Allentown. Additional supplies, dressings, antiseptic, over-the-counter meds, transportation to oncology center. Total, $46,648. I attached it to an email. Subject line, regarding outstanding balance. The body was simple. Attached is my invoice, signed, Erin Walsh, BSN, RN. I didn't send it to just Bruce. I CC'd Melissa and Diane. An hour later, Bruce stood in the doorway of the kitchen holding a printed copy. His face was pale, jaw tight. "You kept track?" he asked. I looked up from my tea, the same mug from this morning. "Someone had to," I said. He didn't reply. Diane stood behind him, silent, eyes moving between us. Her mouth opened slightly. Not in protest, just surprise. I didn't wait for a response. I packed that evening, threw my stethoscope in first like a full stop to the sentence we'd all been too afraid to write. I booked a flight back to Boston that night. For the first time in nearly a year, I slept without setting an alarm. No pill schedule, no thermometer beside the bed, no clipboard with vital signs. Just silence. Not the oppressive kind that used to haunt my nights in Allentown, but the kind that settled gently over the room like snowfall. My temporary rental in Boston wasn't much. A studio with a creaky radiator and a chipped sink. But it was mine. And more than that, it was empty. I woke up slowly, blinking at the light peeking through slanted blinds, unsure what day it was. That used to terrify me. Now it felt like breathing underwater and realizing you won't drown. By noon, I had made oatmeal, answered 3 texts from Janelle, and opened my laptop. The cursor blinked over the title bar. The cost of being the good daughter. Draft 1, blog submission. The words came in quiet bursts. Not angry, not desperate, just honest. Caregiving isn't always about love. Sometimes it's about expectation. Sometimes it's about silence, about disappearing so someone else can feel whole again. I didn't name names. I didn't need to. Janelle called that afternoon. "I read your draft," she said, skipping past greetings. "It's beautiful. Honest, brave." "Thanks," I said, sipping coffee, watching steam spiral. "We'd love to have you back. Maybe part-time? You'd set your own hours. The floor misses you." I let the offer sit between us. 2 days a week, I said finally. No 12-hour shifts. I'm done losing myself. She didn't argue. That night, Melissa called. "I had no idea about the bill," she said without preamble. "Dad sent you what?" I stayed quiet a second too long. "You didn't ask before. Don't pretend to be surprised now." There was a pause on the line. I could picture her kitchen, the quartz island, the cluttered fridge, Riley's homework papers taped to the wall. "I guess I assumed you were fine." "Yeah," I said quietly. That was the problem. Later, I got an email from Bruce. No subject line, just, "We need to talk. This is not who we are." I stared at it for a long time, then opened my spreadsheet again, adjusted a few lines, re-added the emotional labor section I had originally deleted. Overnight wake-ups, silent emotional buffering, doctor advocacy, holiday shifts. I saved a new PDF. Reply to Bruce. "This is exactly who we are. I just stopped pretending." I hit send. 2 days later, a white envelope arrived. The handwriting was Melissa's, a little rushed. Inside, a printed invitation on ivory cardstock, gold foiled. Diane Walsh's retirement party, hosted by her daughters, plural. I stared at it until the ink blurred, the heat rising in my cheeks not from anger, but from something colder. Clarity. They weren't asking me to show up as family. They were asking me to play a role. Again. They threw a party to honor her years of service, forgetting the one who did the last hardest shift. The restaurant had linen tablecloths, floral centerpieces, and an elaborate Happy Retirement Diane. Banners stretched across the back wall in gold script. Waiters passed trays of bacon-wrapped scallops while a slideshow of family photos looped on a mounted screen. Diane in scrubs, Diane on vacation, Diane holding baby Riley. I stood near the back, half shadowed by a potted ficus, watching it all with the clarity of someone no longer trying to belong. Diane beamed at the attention, smiling wide as former co-workers toasted her. Bruce worked the room like a campaign manager, offering hugs and jokes. Melissa stood tall in a navy cocktail dress, hand on Diane's shoulder like a co-host. No one acknowledged the bill. No one asked about Boston. During dessert, Diane took the mic. "Motherhood," she said, voice trembling just enough to feel rehearsed, "has taught me sacrifice, endurance, and love without condition." A polite wave of applause. I raised my glass, but not to drink, just to hide the sharp laugh that nearly escaped. Love without condition. From the woman who tallied my existence in kilowatt hours and food portions. Then Melissa stepped forward, mic in hand. "And tonight," she said brightly, "we celebrate not just Mom's career, but the beautiful example she's been to her daughters." She turned toward me with a smile that begged complicity. "Erin, come say something." I didn't move. "Come on," she said again, softer now. "Just a few words." I shook my head. But before the silence could thicken, someone else stood. A woman I didn't recognize. Gray blazer, glasses, notebook in hand. She stepped forward from one of the side tables. I saw the logo on her lapel. Caregivers United. "I didn't expect to speak," she said, her voice calm, practiced. But I couldn't stay quiet. Erin Walsh's recent article about familial caregiving has deeply moved many of us in the support community. People turned in their seats. "I just wanted to say thank you, Erin, for giving voice to a kind of labor most of us suffer through invisibly." There was a pause, then whispers. Someone clapped. Another followed. Diane looked stunned. Melissa blinked, eyes darting between us. Bruce put a hand on Diane's shoulder, unsure whether to stand or sit. I didn't step forward. I didn't explain. Instead, I met my mother's eyes and said, quietly enough for only her to hear, "Your story ends here. Mine begins again." I turned and walked out. No grand exit, no slammed doors. Just the sound of my own heels and the faint murmur of a room unsure what just happened. Outside, the March air bit at my coatless arms. I didn't care. I walked 2 blocks to the train station, heart steady. No nausea. No regret. Later that night, on the train home, I pulled a new notebook from my bag. It still smelled like paper. Page 1. What I owe myself. I didn't look back as I stepped out of the restaurant. The night air felt cooler than I remembered. Or maybe it was just the weight finally lifting off my chest. Behind me, laughter erupted. Laughter that had nothing to do with me, had never really included me, not even when I gave up everything to keep someone alive. My mother's voice rose for a toast. I didn't hear the words. I didn't need to. The party was never about truth. It was about image. For a year, I had been the shadow in that house. The nurse, the cleaner, the daughter who never made a fuss. And in return, I was sent a bill. Not just printed on paper, but etched into every conversation, every sideways glance, every silence that replaced gratitude. I thought leaving would bring peace. Instead, it brought clarity. I remember the first night I came back to Boston. The rented apartment was half furnished, a little dusty and colder than I expected. But I slept, Really slept, for the first time in 11 months. No alarms, no painkillers to administer, no whispered footsteps outside my door. Just silence. Blessed, affirming silence. The next morning, I made coffee in a chipped mug and read David's last email again. He had moved on. I wasn't surprised. People move on from things they don't understand. But as I stared at his message, all I could think was how little of myself I had left to give. I had bled dry for a family that sent me an invoice. For weeks, I wrote in a new journal. Not dates and medications this time, but questions. What had I become? When did I begin mistaking self-erasure for love? How did I let someone else's definition of good daughter swallow every piece of me? Then came the party invitation. Thick cardstock, gold lettering. Diane Walsh's retirement, hosted by her daughters. Plural. I stared at it for minutes. I wasn't angry. Not in the way I used to be. Anger implies surprise. But I was something colder, quieter, like steel that had spent too long in fire and come out tempered, not broken. I RSP'd. Yes, not because I wanted to be seen, but because I wanted them to look away first. The restaurant was decorated beautifully. Faux cherry blossoms lined the walls, and soft jazz played from a Bluetooth speaker tucked behind a display of old hospital photos. Diane wore pastel pink and smiled like a woman who had never known struggle. Bruce shook hands and told stories that edited me out of every scene. Melissa played host, gliding between tables with practiced ease. To the world, we were a happy trio. To me, we were a cautionary tale dressed in tulle and catered desserts. I sat at the edge of the room, near the window, not by accident. I needed light. Then came the speech. Diane stood and talked about sacrifice, about the joy of healing others, about motherhood. People clapped. She cried. It was a well-rehearsed monologue. Then she said the line that finally unlatched something in me. Being a mother teaches you to give without expecting anything in return. I almost laughed. Instead, I sipped my water, crossed my legs, and waited. Melissa tried to call me up to say a few words. I declined. My silence said more than I ever could. And then the unexpected. A woman, mid-40s, gray streaks in her braid, wearing a caregiver organization pin, stood up near the back. "Excuse me," she said. "I just wanted to thank Erin Walsh. Her article last month moved our entire team. We framed a copy in our office." Gasps, whispers, heads turned. Diane's face went blank. Bruce blinked like he'd been slapped. Melissa looked at her feet. I smiled. The article had been personal, raw. Not a name was mentioned, but every line came from somewhere real. The good daughter doesn't ask. She anticipates, she doesn't argue. She adapts, she doesn't leave, even when she's already gone inside. I left a printed copy on the table next to the cake, bold red ink underlining the closing sentence. Care begins with boundaries, and mine start today. Then I walked out. No drama, no confrontation, just a woman choosing herself. On the train back, I opened a fresh notebook. Page 1 read, "What I owe myself." No tally, no price, just space. And perhaps that is the point. Not all victories are loud. Some unfold in quiet departures, in the defiance of showing up, and then choosing to walk away. Erin didn't demand applause. She didn't get closure in the way movies promise. But she reclaimed something far more valuable: the right to define her own worth. Because when injustice meets the unshakable clarity of self-worth, even the deepest betrayal begins to rot under the light of truth. The ledger they wrote her into. She rewrote with silence, resilience, and a pen only she could hold. And like the final chord of a long-forgotten melody, justice may arrive late. But once heard, it echoes for a lifetime. Thank you for staying with me through this story, for listening, for feeling, for letting these words sit with you, even if they were uncomfortable. Because if you've made it this far, there's a good chance you know what it feels like to be the responsible one, the reliable one, the daughter who never says no. Maybe you've stood at the sink at midnight, rinsing dishes after everyone else went to bed. Maybe you've learned to memorize medication schedules better than birthdays. Maybe you've smiled through the exhaustion, told people you're fine when you haven't been fine for months. Maybe, like me, you've sat with a lump in your throat while hearing a family toast, where everyone was thanked, except you. And maybe you've told yourself that being unnoticed was better than being resented. That invisibility was just the price of being the strong one. If that's you, the story wasn't just mine. It was ours. I wish I could tell you there's a perfect ending, that the people you cared for will wake up one day and apologize, that they'll send letters, make speeches, say the words you've been aching to hear. But sometimes, closure doesn't come from them. It comes from you. From finally saying, I was there, I mattered, and I won't carry this alone anymore. For a long time, I believed love meant labor, that the more I gave, the more I'd eventually feel wanted. But now, I know better. Love shouldn't arrive with invoices. It shouldn't come with conditions, or itemized lists, or guilt disguised as gratitude. So if you're still in that house, still folding towels, still setting alarms at 3 a.m. for someone who never says thank you, or if you've already walked away, but the guilt follows you like a second shadow, I hope this story reminded you of one thing. You're allowed to choose yourself, not out of selfishness, but out of survival. You are allowed to rest, to say no, to grieve the childhood that taught you love equals sacrifice, and to start healing on your own terms. I wrote this story because I know how lonely it feels when people say, you're so strong, and you wish, just for once, they'd ask, but how are you, really? If this story touched even a small part of your heart, if it made you pause, if you've ever held back tears because you didn't want to make things harder for everyone else, please, leave a comment. Tell me where you're watching from. Tell me your version of the night you realized you couldn't keep pretending. And if you know someone who's going through this right now, send this to them. Let them know they're not alone. Because for every person like me, who stood quietly in the corner, who took the photo but wasn't in it, who ran the errands, tracked the vitals, wrote the spreadsheets, and still got left out of the thank you speech, you deserve to be seen. You deserve to breathe without feeling guilty for it. And most of all, you deserve a life that isn't measured by what other people took from you. So, thank you for giving me your time, for making space for this story, and for reminding yourself, by listening, that your story matters too. We don't need applause. We don't need parades, but we do deserve to stop shrinking. And if no one said it to you lately, I will. Thank you for everything you've done and for everything you've survived, even the parts no one else ever noticed.